for coming, and I could see that many of you made a great effort to get here, and it's very much appreciated. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you my great friend and longtime conversational adversary, Christopher Hitchens, for several reasons, because I think Christopher's role as probably the greatest literary journalist of our generation, of my generation, is widely misunderstood. Christopher is often described as contrarian, by which the meaning I take from that is someone who continually takes an oppositional position. It isn't really true. Christopher Hitchens has stood for things, and he has maintained them, things like free expression, things like open inquiry, things like humane and decent societies. He stood for those things when other people were willing to let them go by the boards. I guess that makes him a contrarian, but I think of him more as he puts it, as somebody who comes from the other island, whose family did at least. To me, he's a rooted man. He's rooted in great things, things of great value, and we're going to talk about some of them tonight. We're going to disagree about some of them, and then we'll hear from you. So I hope you'll join me in welcoming Christopher Hitchens here to Los Angeles.
We got that bit right.
Did indeed.
They think it's Lucozade or something. Should I start? Should I respond?
Well, yes, please do.
Well, that was extremely handsome of you, I must say. And I want to tell the people who've been good enough to come tonight, thank you very much, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades, friends. Oh, I see nervous reluctance to applaud at any. That I've been up and down the country with this book, and I've been debating with Baptists in North Carolina and rabbis in Coral Gables and Al Sharpton in New York and so on. But this is actually the only evening that I booked on this trip on which I feel nervous at all. And that's because Mr. Rutten here, with whom as he says, I've been discussing for many years, really does know what he's talking about. When it's come to religion, and that can't be said for many of the ministers. And so if I wanted to ask anyone, I have sometimes had to ask, what exactly is the difference between a Melkite Greek Catholic and a Greek Orthodox and a Maronite in Lebanon? There's only one person I would know to call who would know the answer to this. And that's why it's very handsome of Tim to agree to do this, because not to make this too furry between us, not to make it too intimate or too warm or friendly. I would like, on both our behalves, to dispel that if I can right now. The critical thing is this: what is most important to him is most hateful to me. And we're here to prove that friendship is possible under those conditions. But that thought should not at all inhibit anyone, and hope won't inhibit him from, well, I think the expression may be bringing it on. He minds about this a lot. It's a great deal to him. He's proved it in innumerable ways, not just by his study of it, but by his devotion to it. And I have announced it to be public enemy number one. So if this all works this evening, it'll be a tribute to civilized discourse, if you insist. Okay. Thus my opening statement.
Disarming and provocative.
Sweet.
Well, let's speak by the book, or we're ruined, right? This is the book. Christopher, I'm going to read a passage to you here, and just so we can get the flavor of the argument here, and then we'll go to the substance. But if I may, you write here about how so you tolerate religious expression on the parts of your friends.
Not tolerate, but
Well, indulge, as you say.
better, yeah.
Indulgence, yes, is the word used. And he says, you write, there is a real and serious difference between me and my religious friends. And the real and serious friends are sufficiently honest to admit it. I would be quite content to go to their children's bar mitzvahs, to marvel at their Gothic cathedrals, to respect their belief in the Quran, that the Quran was dictated, though exclusively in Arabic, to an illiterate prophet, or to interest myself in Wicca and Hindu and Jain consolations. And as it happens, I will continue to do this without insisting on the polite reciprocal condition, which is that they, in turn, leave me alone. Right? Fair enough. But this religion is ultimately incapable of doing. As I write these words, and as you read them, and as you listen to them, people of faith are in their different ways planning your and my destruction, and the destruction of all the hard-won human attainments that I have touched upon. Religion poisons everything. So religion is ultimately incapable of leaving people alone. Is that correct?
Yes, I think it is, because why not start with the benign? This isn't going to go on for too long, by the way, this benign version of our disagreement, but
Right.
why not continue with it for a little bit? I mean, for example, you, as a very, very serious Roman Catholic, must look at me and think, if you're true to your faith, I can't watch this go on any longer. I don't want Christopher to go to hell. It's not right to do it. I have a responsibility to prevent him, to exert my best efforts to stop this from happening. I can see him doing it. It's like watching a friend become a hopeless alcoholic or a drug addict or a serial killer. I must intervene. I may not watch this. I must do my best. And I know that you ought to be thinking that, and it makes me very nervous. Just as I was debating with a Calvinist in Georgia the other day, I said, well, look, since you say you're Baptist, do you affirm John Calvin's teachings on hell and predestination, or do you not? And if you do not, because I know Southern hospitality often inhibits people from telling guests that they're going to hell on the first night of their stay in there. Trying to make it easy for him.
Not if you're Catholic.
But if you don't think so, could I know on what authority you don't do this? On what authority do you disagree, as well as on what authority you do? So, when, for example, now moving to the vulgar side of your church, the only Catholic who almost every secular person I know admires, or used to admire, Mother Teresa, the so-called Mother Teresa of Calcutta, journeys to the country that I know matters most to you, Ireland, to say no one in Ireland should be allowed to be divorced. I've arrived in Dublin, a town of which I know nothing, capital of a country about which I know nothing, to support the view of those who say that there can be no change in the Irish Constitution. Sorry, the Irish Constitution, which forbids divorce. We don't just forbid it for Catholics, we forbid it for everybody. And it's praised by everyone. Finally, Mother Teresa's come to aid us in the argument. Right. And while she's there, takes the opportunity to say that not only should Irish people not be allowed abortions, but nor should they be allowed contraception. She's not saying, I have a great relationship with Jesus, and I have a wonderful church and a wonderful faith, and it makes me happy. She's saying, it better make you happy too, because whether you agree with it or not, we're going to impose it on you. Now, that distinction must clearly be apparent to everybody here. The same is true of our Muslim brothers and sisters. They say, you may not know it yet, but our prophet had the last revelation, the only one.
Right, the final one. There's always a final revelation.
Ultimate one.
Yeah.
Your revelations were not bad. We agree with you about the virgin birth. We agree with you about various of the more horrible Mosaic prohibitions. You notice that Islam plagiarizes from Judaism and Christianity only the most horrible bits and leaves out the Greek stuff. It does. But they do all that. They say, well, we even think you're people of the book. They tolerate you, in other words. They say, we tolerate you. I'm not going to be tolerated by these people. They say, but we've got something last and final, ultimate. You only need this one book. If you only get round to believing in it, you would be happy. But we can't be happy until you do. Now, I'm very sorry. I'm extremely sorry to say this, and I'll put it as mildly as I can, but I decline to be spoken to in that tone of voice by anybody. I hope that's plain.
Fair enough.
I hope that's absolutely plain. I won't be talked to like that. I'm not going to be tolerated by the admirers of an illiterate Middle Eastern peasantry.
No, I see that.
I think we'd be better off outgrowing it.
We've all, this is also a bit of, if I may say, the method of this book, which I enjoy immensely. By the way, I do agree with Shalom Aleichem that in the shtetl there were only two people who were really serious about God. One was the rabbi, and the other was the village atheist. Everybody else was just sort of going along. Now,
No, but wait, I have to do this now. You've done
Go
that.
right ahead.
The third was the guy, it's mentioned in a great story by Irving Howe, which I think he borrowed from Isaac Singer, the man who stands on the wall of the shtetl. I think it's the town of Helm. And when the visitors come, he's always standing on the city wall looking out over the plains. And they ask him, well, what are you doing there, just standing there? And he said, no, I'm not just standing here. They pay me to stand here. Well, what do they pay you to do, standing there? Well, they pay me to watch out for the Messiah and to tell and ring this bell when he's coming. And they say, so what's it like? He said, well, steady work.
That's true enough. That's true enough.
It's man-made, ladies.
It's man-made, yes, and constructed in much the same clever way that this argument is constructed, because we've slid from the debatable point to the inarguable ones. And the debatable, but I want to circle back to that debatable point because we have experience to draw on. You and I have been friends for how many years?
Well, I remember very distinctly when I first met you, which would have to be 83.
83.
So we're getting on for a quarter of a century.
Or a quarter of a century.
Of doing this.
And we even did a film
Yes.
together on religion.
Mr. Rutten and I circled Los Angeles interviewing everyone from Lubavitcher rabbis to New Age mavens to Wiccans and Satanists.
And the people who worship the atomic bomb. Remember them?
Yes, I remember
They
the
were
bomb.
they were the followers of a deranged Polish
I remember
countess.
the bomb worship but then eschatology is one of my big worries, especially now, because all religion, in a sense, has to hope for the end of days.
Right.
Does hope for it,
But Christopher,
secretly or openly, wants this to be over. It's one of the things I don't like, I have to say.
well, of course, yeah. But
They can. I don't mind if they go, but I don't want them taking me with them. Rapture yourself, big boy.
But Christopher, in all this time, have I ever made a single proselytizing remark to you?
No, you have not, but and it wouldn't be your style. But that's why I took you up, perhaps preemptively, on your very serious and devout Catholicism. In that, I think it could perhaps only have been good manners. No, I don't mean to mock. I don't mean to say anything.
What about just respect for another person's conscience?
Indeed, but you ought to have said to me, "Look, Christopher, at least in your own, within what I understand to be your own lights, and you could very well contradict me now, and I'd have to accept your negation. But it seems to me, from what I've read of your doctrine, that you ought not to be watching me without trying to save me. A word from you would have impressed me, by the way, if you'd said, look, Christopher, that was fun. We had a great evening. Most of our friends are secularists. We all know the jokes that we can make. But do you mind if I just detain you for a minute before you go home? Are you sure? Are you sure I can't help you to save yourself?
But that would be profoundly disrespectful.
No, I wouldn't have minded in the
It
least.
would be, yes, it would. Someone might ask you a question, and you would be available in response. But I think this undercuts this notion that and it's one of the threads that runs through this book is the necessity of making valid arguments in this absolutist way. And I wonder, is it necessary to state these propositions quite so absolutely to find any use in them? To say that some forms of religious expression are destructive, just in the same way. I mean, look, there are some religious systems and sets of religious beliefs, like some people, who are no damn good. But that's not the tenor. That's not the tenor of the argument you've advanced here.
No, I mean, I'm only a poorly evolved mammal, half a chromosome away from a chimpanzee.
Or the pig, as you point out.
Or indeed able to take a heart valve from a pig, and may possibly soon be in need of same. Or a skin graft, which would negate quite a lot of religion right there, by the way. Kosher I'm not, okay? And I think religion shows every sign of having been invented by a species that is half a chromosome away from a chimpanzee. But I still take what the religious believe to be, in that sense, morally serious. And I can't write a book for everybody I meet, which I discovered on this tour I would essentially have had to do. They say, listen, I don't believe in the virgin birth, I don't believe in the rapture, I don't believe in predestination and hell. And so people who've said up till then that they're Catholics, Calvinists, Muslims, they say, well, that's what your texts say, that's all I can write about. If you're all going to take it a la carte and decide which bit you believe, I still want to know on which authority you don't believe it. Now, you're interviewing me, as it were.
Yes.
But so I shouldn't return the question.
Oh, please go right ahead.
If you do not believe that Jesus was born of a virgin, had God for his father, went through unbelievable suffering to be the vicarious recipient of your sin, your guilt, take it away from you, didn't in fact die, but rose again, and will come again to judge the quick and the dead. If you don't believe any of that,
The Nicene Creed.
you're not really a Catholic, it seems to me.
This is absolutely true.
And since I find great difficulty in believing that someone like you does really believe this, I don't know what book I should have written to unpersuade you of something that you can't quite apparently get your mind to assimilate.
Well, I guess what I'm getting
But
at,
I would
though,
say that your doubt is a point for me rather than a point against.
no, I would say that one of the deficiencies in this immensely thought-provoking book is that it does not allow for the progress of religious institutions along with other human ones. And one thing that anyone who claims to be a religious believer today must have forsworn, not only in their in a formal way, but I think in their hearts, is any notion of coercion. Because coercion, religious coercion, has, undoubtedly proven to be something evil. And that brings me to, if I may, since I am the interviewer,
Absolutely.
the point and privilege here. There's a wonderful, wonderful argument that you raise at the end of the book that you call your anticipated objection, where you go to the question of the terrible killer societies of the 20th century.
Yes.
Your own experience with some of them. And you lay out a series of arguments about the problem here is that if we look back across this terrible century that we've just completed, murder occurred on an unimagined and frankly still unimaginable scale, and it was done primarily by societies which were formerly atheist societies where atheism, which you advance here as this, as not the necessary good, the unavoidable good, that was the official orthodoxy. Stalin did not act in the name of Russian orthodoxy. Hitler did not act in the name of Christianity. Mao did not act in the name of Confucianism. North Korea, which as you say, you still cannot remember without a shudder, is certainly not a religious state. It is an officially atheist state. So you make an argument about this in which you say that that, or suggest at least, that these states were murderous because their leaders were acting on remnant religious impulses or appropriations of religious impulses. Is that really your position on
Yes, it is. I mean,
this? Is that a fair summary of?
yeah, no, it is also, by the way, a very good summary of my case, though, just to tease people and make them buy the book, where I have a whole chapter on this, available fine bookstores everywhere. And everything.
It's a very fine chapter.
You don't, and I've now, because of course this question comes up at every stop, I would now be able to write that chapter. That's the great thing about writing a book, by the way. You come into contact with the people in the arguments you should have met before you wrote it. But that's a common experience of authorship, if that's not too postmodern an observation. I was still hew to what I say in it. It's not possible to say of fascism, which is the movement that invents the term totalitarian, that it's secular. It's just not possible to say so. I mean, of Mussolini, Franco, Salazar, the Ustasha, you know this very well because your church has been
Slovakia.
Yeah, Slovakia,
yes.
the head of the Nazi puppet state was actually a man in holy orders.
That's right, Tiso.
Your father, your Holy Father and your church has been through agony about, can't still seem to apologize quite in the right tone about that fact and its implications. So that, I think, excuses the secularist, not for everything, but doesn't implicate them, of German National Socialism.
Wait a minute. You can't think of fascism as having a religious base. It was tolerated by religious conservatives and reactionaries in those societies, but certainly not. It was certainly not. I mean, in order, for example, for fascism to take hold in Bavaria, I mean, Pius XII had to gut the Catholic.
Oh, I'll come to Bavaria.
Yeah, all right, go ahead.
Because we haven't moved into the German National Socialism, but not to be willing to concede, as at least the Church has been, that in Spain and Portugal and Italy and so on, it was essentially empowered by a concordat with the Vatican. I think you would not deny. Now, German National Socialism is a somewhat different thing, because though it draws upon Protestant as well as Catholic Christianity and anti-communism, and I think above all anti-Semitism, and prayers were said, it is a fact, by the bishops of Germany every year in April, on Hitler's birthday, on the instruction of the Vatican. You can't say that that's a Catholic movement because they wanted to replace Christianity with German paganism and Nordic myths combined with ethnic blood legends and all kinds of ghastly nonsense. And but still, you can't call that secular, by the way. It's still mythology and blood worship, and Odin is no better than any of these other imaginary figures. But it had a hatred for Christianity, I will say that, and it did also arouse some which it didn't elsewhere so much, some very, very brave and distinguished and famous Christian opponents who paid for it with their lives and seem to have been glad to do so.
Since we're going to single out Pius XII for his dereliction, we'd probably have to cite Pius XI for Mitbrunner Sonnigen.
Yeah, but it's kind of amazing that the anti-Nazi Pope dies in 1939 and the pro-Nazi Pope is appointed by God in 1940. That seems like a lot to expect of the Vicar of Christ. I mean, it's a lot to believe if you are a Catholic. And so it's not, I would not say National Socialism was secular in any sense at all, let alone atheist. And then remember of the third pillar of the Axis powers, the terrifying dictatorship of Hirohito. It's held in power by two considerations. One, its leader is not godly, but is a god.
Is himself a god, yes?
And its ideology is Zen Buddhism, which is the training of its soldiers.
I thought Shinto, not Zen.
No, Zen too. Brian Victoria's book, which I mentioned in my book, Zen at War, absolutely confirms it. Zen discipline was the order of the day in the Japanese Imperial Army. Shinto too, I think it was actually more Shinto that trained the kamikaze idea, but Zen as well. The leader is himself a god. That's not a secular state by any means. By the way, I don't know if this is true because I haven't checked, but it comes from a good source. Some of you may know Michael Krasny, who does this brilliant show on interviewed me the other day in San Francisco, home of the American Buddhist. Said, had I followed the genocide trials in Cambodia? And I said, you know what, I've been busy, I haven't been doing this. I probably should have done, I'd used to. Civil society has recovered in Cambodia to the extent that it looks as if the Khmer Rouge criminals are going to be tried for genocide now.
Right.
The Buddhist party in Cambodia doesn't want it. It says, why do this? All those people who were killed had committed sins in previous lives. This is a mental surrender, and a moral one too. This kind of contemplative nonsense, turn off the mind and you'll have bliss, has ghastly consequences. The sleep of reason brings forth monsters. That's Buddhism. That's Buddhism, the resort that everyone goes to when they've exhausted monotheism.
Right. I think it's a fair point. It's a fair point. But
well, I haven't got to Stalin yet. By the way,
it leaves aside the fact that the killer, upon whom they're commenting or making this moral surrender, was in fact an atheist. No.
Well, the name of you mean in Cambodia?
I mean Pol Pot, yes.
Yeah. Well, in Cambodia, all I know, and I know this much, is that the ruling power, the mysterious, ultimate, absolute, was called the Angkar, which is a reference back to Angkor Wat and the ancient Buddhist mysterious dictatorship that existed in the Stone Age of Indochina. Right. And you'll find, if you look into it, that the current extremely repellent dictatorship in Burma is also the great builder of Buddhist temples and the great mass producer of Buddhist statues and rules in the name of Buddhism, as did Lon Nol's original army in Cambodia that was the agent of the United States invasion of the country, and defender and profiteer from it. So I'm not so sure that I'm not so sure that if you change your climate from east to west that you escape human irrationality or servility. It seems to me that it follows you wherever you go, as long as you're willing to surrender your mind and to put your trust in faith. I think the outcomes there are always the same. Sleep of reason will bring forth monsters. I may not know much, but I think I know that much.
I think that's quite correct, but it doesn't get around the fact that Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge were an officially atheist party.
Well, I'm not sure, you see, if they were. I think they had Buddhist, a sort of ancient ethnic, pseudo-confessional, mystical nationalism to them. And I haven't answered your question about Stalin yet, and because I've babbled a bit, I ought to. I don't want anyone to think I've dodged it. Well, put it like this, with communism, which is, unlike fascism and National Socialism, officially materialistic. You're Joseph Stalin. It's 1917 in Russia. Millions of Russians have been told for hundreds of years that the head of the Russian government is something more than a human being. Not a god. It's not as bad as Japan. And not quite a pope either, but he's the Tsar is the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. He stands between heaven and earth. Mm-hmm. A bit more like the Middle Kingdom. Servility and credulity is en masse inculcated right across the country. Millions of people know no better. If you're Joseph Stalin, who, by the way, this is an opportunist point of mine, but I have to mention it, was a long-time seminary student, had rehearsed to be a priest. You shouldn't be...
Was he not expelled?
I think he may have just cleared out, but
I think he was
one way or another. Yeah. But you shouldn't be, if you're Joseph Stalin, you shouldn't be in the dictatorship business if you can't exploit a great pool of credulity and servility like that. There you have it. It's waiting. All you need to do is say, I'm the new Tsar. And what happens? A new inquisition, a heresy hunt, show trials. The traitors are among us. The heretics are here, trying to poison the wells. Miracles. Lysenko, our great new biologist, has shown how we can grow 25-foot wide tomatoes that will feed an entire family. Stakhanovite saints.
I get it.
The entire thing is completely replicated and collapses, as the Inquisition did. And so, now,
so Stalin is murderous because he's an imperfect
well, it's
atheist?
a replication. It's a surrogate for the same thing. It's a replication of a counterfeit or if you like, a true bill copy, the same thing. But here's what you need to have a level playing field between your point and mine. You would need to find a society hitherto pious and devout, and organic and stable, that adopted the views of and tried to teach its children the principles of Lucretius, Epicurus, Spinoza, Galileo, Einstein, Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, Bertrand Russell, the greatest atheist of his day and the first person to work out that Lenin was a new god, by the way, to adopt those teachings and then to see if that society fell into famine, war, tyranny, torture, gulag, and so on. That would be the fair test, and that test is yet to come. But I believe myself that we can recover the lost connection, the one that monotheism severed between Athens and Jerusalem. And we could get back a world where philosophy was valued. The beauty of science was considered worth studying and worth revering even. Where literature would be the key to the study of ethics and morality. And if you wanted the transcendent, you'd have love and sex and music. And you wouldn't need any supernatural permission for any of this nonsense. Well, I think I miss it terribly. I feel as if something was torn away from me before I was born by the loss of that. But we're smart enough to get it back. If only we will leave behind the hideous nonsense of the holy books and the vile preachments of those who want the world to come to an end.
Well, I'm for that. I'm for that.
Good.
Let's see. On the other hand, has there been such a place?
Well,
I mean, I hate to sound like I'm speaking on behalf of our fallen nature, but has there been such?
Well,
a
the
place?
country I happen to be. May I use an
Are we
expression?
going to get Andalusian Spain now?
May I just say something that
Yes, please.
I hope it doesn't seem
Please.
too populist, but an expression I've been waiting for a long time to employ. Not to you so much, but to you too, but to the audience. My fellow Americans. Yeah, I've been wanting it a long time to say this. I took my oath of citizenship last month on the 13th of April, which is my birthday and also Mr. Jefferson's birthday. I'm his biographer at his memorial in Washington, D.C. by the tidal basin, just before the cherry blossoms were blown away by the next breeze. And I was able to take my oath and say that I specifically wanted to take it to the only constitution ever in human history that doesn't mention God, and doesn't mention religion except to separate it from politics.
Right.
And to the preamble to the Declaration, which mentions only a creator but no intervening God, a personal God, no intervening one. And to say how extraordinary it is that most Americans, born to this right and this beauty, don't appreciate it because it comes to them as a birthright. And the Virginia Statute on Religious Freedom, the basis of our fantastic First Amendment, means a huge amount to me. No tithe can be paid by any American to any church. The government has no right to tell anyone how or where or in which way to worship at all. And that in response to the petitioners of Danbury, Connecticut, the president wrote back to them and said there will be always a wall of separation to protect your rights and your freedoms. So I have a new slogan. Mr. Jefferson, build up that wall.
But
I hope to be joined in this slogan.
Yes. Well, actually, I join you in that slogan because I think one of the curious things about and remarkable things about Jefferson's genius and one of its unintended consequences is that religion, as in all its variations, has flourished behind that wall here in the United States as it has nowhere else. That religion severed from state support and from the notion of the official church has flourished here. In a way.
Tocqueville was right, as are you. That if it's a voluntary association, it can be very pluralistic. After all, you do know, so you don't you say? Because you know, but I wonder if anyone here knows. Who were the Baptists of Danbury, Connecticut writing about to the president? Who were they afraid of? Who did they think was going to persecute them? Why did they want a wall? The Congregationalists of Danbury, Connecticut.
Vicious congregations.
That's who they were afraid of.
Vicious bands of roving congregations.
Who was killing the Quakers in Pennsylvania? The Presbyterians of Pennsylvania. In Maryland, at the time of before the Constitutional Convention, you could only be in office if you were a Catholic. In New York, you couldn't be in office if you were a Catholic. Right? In Georgia, you had to say you were a Protestant, whatever that meant. In Rhode Island, you could not be a Jew and hold office. In Connecticut, you could be a Jew and hold office, but you couldn't be a Catholic and hold office. It was going to be religious chaos on the European scale. Unbelievably, we had the Philadelphia Enlightenment that said, no, we don't have to go through this again. The United States will be different about this. We won't allow it. There will be no such test. There will be no such. People should know only how lucky they are. I think it's of the absolutely first importance to defend it.
Yeah, Christopher, let me ask you this in all seriousness. This is a profoundly post 9/11 book.
Yes.
You wrote this book, I think, because of what occurred on 9/11 and because of the struggle that we now confront with fundamentalist jihadist Islam, or if you've called it Islamofascism.
Yes.
Okay. Is it possible that in making the argument there and in trying and in giving that argument as much breadth as possible, you've overlooked the virtues of religious pluralism in a country that enforces, albeit imperfectly and with continual struggle,